Welcome to Thursday Aspirations, a time and space and place for teachers who are looking to create a brighter future.
Good evening. We meet every Thursday at 7 o'clock live on Facebook, and our chats are primarily designed for teachers. Now, we thought today we will have a chat, or actually I will have a chat with Mary about why he quit teaching. So our conversation may be useful to those of you, those teachers who are thinking if they should go or should they stay. Now, stay with us until the end of our conversation because we are going to have for you a special tip. Okay, Mary, so over to you. You left teaching, but before I ask you why you left teaching, let's go to your beginnings. How did you start teaching?
Well, when I left university, I went on voluntary service overseas, and the only thing I could offer, I wasn't particularly good at digging wells or building houses or whatever. The only thing I could offer was to teach, and I thought I'd be teaching English or maybe teaching science. And as luck would have it, and I was lucky, I ended up teaching psychology and sociology in the Philippines at a college. And it was a fantastic job, I have to say, and one which I greatly enjoyed. So I developed a taste for teaching, but I hadn't been trained as a teacher at that point. And I only came into teaching later, having worked for voluntary service overseas for nearly 5 years on their staff. And then I was having to decide, do I go overseas again, which it just wasn't the right time in my life to go off to Africa for 2 or 3 years or whatever, and or do I look for a different employment? And it was then that I thought, okay, I'm going to train to be a teacher. And I went to Kiel University and trained really aiming at the FE sector. They had a specialist program in that, preparing people to teach in the older age group.
So clearly you love teaching. What do you specifically love about teaching?
Yes, I did love teaching. I mean, there were so many things, as any teacher will tell you, that's there to enjoy about teaching. And I think it played to my wish to, it's hard for a man to say this, but, you know, to explain things to people. I think I was very enthusiastic about sociology and what sociology can do, and maybe even more so about psychology. And my first teaching position that I got was at a sixth form college, a fantastic purpose-built sixth form college in Essex. And at my interview, I went there for a sociology job, and the head said, could I teach psychology? And I immediately said, well, yes, of course. And promptly learned much more about the subject than I had ever at university. But I enjoyed it. The students were interested in those subjects, and the college was very forward-thinking, had a big theatre department in it, a drama department. I got involved in that. I got involved in the sports. I ran basketball and so on. And there was much about the job that was very enjoyable, not least the fact that the college, the ethos of the college was to take in students of all backgrounds and abilities. And we had a large department which was called Foundation Studies, which had students in it who were over 16 but had not been really at all successful in academic pursuits. But my experience of them was not that they weren't bright. It was very often that they couldn't concentrate for that length of time. And we developed a course to meet their needs. And that was very fulfilling, being involved in that and A-level work and GCSE work. There was a lot of things going on.
So you clearly loved a lot of things, but was there anything which irritated you, didn't work, what were the downsides of being a teacher?
Well, it's a good question, Dorothy. And we did have somebody come in once who was doing research, and they researched the staff. And when they gave their feedback to us as a college, they said, you really have very few problems. Because when I asked everybody what was the biggest problem in the college, they said that there was literally a bun fight in the student canteen, people throwing buns in the student canteen, and nothing much worse than that. So I think that first job of mine was almost as ideal as it could get. But I moved on from there in order to, expand my horizons, really. And that was just at the time where things were beginning to change, and the men, it was usually men in grey suits, were coming in evidence more and more with outlooks from the local authority, what they needed, things to be measured, efficiency and efficiency measures were coming in, and that bit by bit the job began to change. It wasn't enough to be really effective in the classroom and get good examination results. You were having to meet all sorts of other criteria, and that was pulling time away just from teaching. And I think also I had a sense that there was more that I could do as an individual. And either I had to climb the greasy pole in education, which is not that easy. It's got a very flat structure. There are not that many promoted positions. And I reached, after a number of years, I'd reached the top of my scale. Or I had to look for something else to do. And I think there was a genuine sense for me of I didn't want to beat my head against the brick walls that were being constructed by the bureaucrats who were outside of education, would come in and tell us what we ought to be doing without too much sympathy to those who were teaching very effectively.
So why did you actually quit? Because you did.
Well, it wasn't an overnight decision. It had its roots back when a colleague of mine got very depressed, and I found out that within Essex, there were virtually no facilities at all for somebody at that time to find a counsellor. But believe it or not, it's changed a lot now, of course. And it nudged me to train in counselling. And as I did that, I developed a great interest in it. It played to my interest in psychology, my skills working with people. And so that became something. And at that time, the costs involved were very often covered by the colleges I was working at. So I did a full training with support because people saw that skill as being useful to the colleges where I was working.
Yeah.
And then there came the time where I had to make a choice. Was I going to do something different, or was I going to stay in education?
Yeah. And do you have any regrets?
Well, I can remember the period after I had handed in my resignation, and I discussed with my head of department at the time, and we both agreed I should stay teaching 1 day a week. For me, it was like a safety blanket. For him, I suppose it was similar. He wanted my experience around. But over the weekend from the Friday to the Monday, we both realised that wasn't really feasible. And that period when I'd let go of teaching entirely, was nerve-wracking. It was I knew I had opportunities, but nothing had fallen quite into place. But very shortly after that, and I think this fits in with my philosophy that when you really put out a strong call, the universe answers in some way. Very shortly after that, I was on a course training to take my psychotherapeutic skills into business. And within a month or two after that, I was out in Sweden actually working with clients, and it was a really interesting job and earning far more money. So yes, I had a few wobbles. It wasn't without risk, and it wasn't without tummy flutterings, but fairly quickly it settled down.
So actually, what you've just told me formulated a fantastic tip for our listeners.
Okay.
You don't have to make a decision now while you are still teaching. If you are not sure what decision to make, if you are not sure if you should stay or if you should leave, use your time while you are still teaching to prepare your exit strategy, just like you did.
Indeed.
Well, thank you. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And next week, you will find out why I left teaching. So I hope you will find it.
It's a very interesting story, and I should know.
And invite any friends, any teachers, anybody who might find our Thursday chat beneficial. Join us at 7 o'clock every Thursday. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, and thank you.